Stalker is a series of first-person shooters with survival and horror elements developed by GSC Game World. This series has been on my backlog for a long while now. I've always been interested in playing. I love me some post-apocalyptic shooters like the Bethesda Fallouts and the Metro series, so in theory, Stalker should be right up my alley. After playing all 3 Stalker games, I never expected my feelings to be as mixed as they are about them. Let's start with Stalker Shadow of Chernobyl, released in 2007. I'm playing with the Zone Reclamation Project mod to have the least buggy experience possible. The game still looks good with an excellent, depressing, and bleak atmosphere, though it does look a bit flat by today's standards. The nights are dark as hell, and there's always gunfire or sounds of wild mutant animals in the distance to keep your balls tucked and your asshole clenched and ready. It reminds me of the Gothic games in many ways. When the rain hits at night and you're alone with your flashlight out, it's very cozy in a messed up way. The mutant enemies all look disgusting, from all those mutated dogs to bloodsuckers and those controller motherfuckers. I wanna slap this guy on the belly. The game ran well too, but it did crash a couple times. Overall, the game looks good still. It's a bit outdated in some areas, but the atmosphere and the gross ass mutants make up for it. The game consists of exploring the zone, doing quests while looting and shooting. The gunplay is weird. The accuracy and damage of your weapons depend on the difficulty setting you're on, with the hardest master difficulty being the one with the most damage and accuracy. You would think at least the damage would be higher the lower the difficulty, but that's not the case here. Shouldn't accuracy be affected by your in-game stats like in Deus Ex or something? I don't get what they're going for here. I started the game in master difficulty, but my ass was clapped by the enemies and I found myself running out of ammo pretty quickly, so I hopped my ass to the medium stalker difficulty. Now the problem is less about getting one-tapped and running out of ammo and more about trying to actually hit a dude. Using iron sight doesn't seem to affect the accuracy much, unless it's with certain scopes, so I kinda just crouch and slowly burst fire from the hip through the whole game, peeking from corners when I can. It does feel tactical, but in a very weird and janky way. Like, you can't run into those assholes and pop them in the head because they'll pop you, so you just gotta stay back and take pot shots at them, hoping it hits. But at the same time, I can waste an entire building full of guys if I just patiently crouch behind a wall and peek once in a while. I can't exactly say this is good, so I'm just gonna call it charming and move on. You can bleed out during gunfights and get radiation poisoning exploring the zone, so having some bandages to patch yourself up and vodka or anti-radiation drugs is essential. I don't know how true that vodka thing is in real life, but it's another reason to get drunk and piss your pants, I guess. You can stock those items up pretty easily in Stalker difficulty, so you don't have to worry too much. This might make the game easy, but with the way the AI behaves and the way guns work, I don't want to complain too much. Speaking of guns, there are quite a few types of rifles and handguns with different ammo types. It's hard to keep track of which gun uses which ammo type. You gotta hover on the gun, read the description, and then look for the ammo in your inventory to keep track of how much you have. It's not exactly convenient. It also sucks that if enemies don't drop the right ammo type for your gun, you're just straight up fucked. Because of that, I have like 3 to 4 different rifles in my bag at all times, and that made me overweight more often than not. You gotta choose being able to defend your butt cheeks, or being able to haul ass in a tough situation. With that said, looting and selling the loot for profit is not a viable option. And coupled with the fact that you can only sell weapons in good condition, you're better off just looting what you need and go. You can get a suit that can increase carry weight late game, but that's about all I can find for that problem. As a survival game, I think this is all serviceable. The survival elements are pretty standard these days, having played games like Minecraft and The Forest, and you do feel like you're surviving an irradiated hellscape. I just wish there were more quality of life improvements. The map is split into multiple zones connected with loading screens, so it's not exactly open world. Exploration is sometimes rewarding. You can find these items called artifacts that can increase your stats like bullet and radiation resistance, but there's radiation and anomalies everywhere to tear your shit up, so it's discouraged to stray off the beaten path and do your own thing. Most of the artifacts I found aren't that useful anyway, often increasing stats by only a few percent. All the good shit is found near the end. I guess it's easier to loot and sell artifacts compared to guns though if you need the money. The only time when it's worthwhile to go off the beaten path a little is when you know there's a stalker cache nearby with supplies that can help you. I wish the game would let you know where the cool shit are. Like, you can talk to a guy at an outpost who lets you know where the powerful artifacts are. Like, oh shit, I heard there's this artifact that doubles the size of your cock and increase your height to at least 6'9" for maximum mating press efficiency. I would totally go there and risk it all. There's no fast travel, so you have to walk or run everywhere. On one hand, that lets you take in the atmosphere and vibes that the game does such a great job producing. But on the other hand, you're just walking and sometimes shooting a rabid dog and some guys who try to pull up on your cheeks and unleash 1,000 years of death. I've never been the type to walk instead of fast travel in open world, so I'm not a fan. Stalker is a game about taking only what you need to survive in an irradiated hellscape. It forces you to choose between fun and convenience, and if you try to go for both, you get your nipples twisted. This is a game for people who finds fun in the struggle of things, not necessarily for the rewards it could get them, because there's not a whole lot worthwhile here, but simply because of the satisfaction of surviving a tough situation. You finish a quest, you get some more money to buy some new gear and ammo, just to do it all over again. Even though I'm not a fan of this type of game, it did keep me captivated enough to go through them. There's definitely something magical here. What I'm trying to say is, I don't like BDSM. The story is cool, but it's not presented in the most smooth way. You play as a stalker with amnesia, saved by some random dude passing by when your death truck crashed. Stalkers are basically guys who are in the zone to look for treasures and shit to get rich or whatever they want to do. You're brought to this old merchant guy who helps you get back on your feet. Apparently, before you got bonked in the head, you were looking for someone named Straylock and kill him. The merchant helps you with his connections and you slowly trace Straylock's steps. You make your way into creepy ass underground labs and tunnels and shit, and it's all nasty, helping scientists with research. Straylock was looking for something called the Wish Granter, to presumably get a wish granted, and so is many other groups of stalkers. If you go to the Wish Granter inside a place called the Sarcophagus, you can make a wish, but it's a monkey's paw kind of thing, so you die at the end. Going to the Wish Granter can give you one of multiple bad endings, but if you decide to follow a separate quest to meet this guy called the Guide, he tells you where to find a guy named Doctor who's Straylock's friend. After getting exploded, the Doctor reveals that you are Straylock and that the Wish Granter is a scam and gets you to get a decoder from a hotel room and investigate deeper into the sarcophagus. Deeper inside, you find a hologram thing that some scientists are using to communicate to you. The scientists made something called the Sea Consciousness that was supposed to tap into something called the Null Sphere to eradicate negative emotions within humans. Instead though, they fucked it all up and resulted in the current state of the zone. You can either join the Sea Consciousness and get put inside a pod to goon to sissy hypno imagery forever, or destroy it, with the latter being the canon ending. The end. I think the lore of Stalker is cool, seeing how things came together and what the results of the experiments did to the zone. The story though wasn't told in the most smooth fashion. A lot of it is told in radio calls, sometimes during shootouts which can be hard to pay attention to, notes, and walls of text. There are a handful of pre-rendered cutscenes, but they're mostly flashbacks with random shit that you don't have the context of yet happening. I prefer visual storytelling, so this whole game is just a blur except for certain sections like the Brain Scorcher or the Sarcophagus, but I do get what the devs were going for. Stalkers come to the zone to strike it rich, giving up what they had and risk their lives to get even the slightest chance of making it happen. The zone is an unforgiving place, attracting stalkers only for them to be diddled by the monsters and other people. We get a manifestation of this with the monkey's paw nature of the Wish Granter. You want to make your desires come true, but the results won't be what you wished for. The zone is a result of an attempt to control human emotions, or people playing God if you will. Rather the intentions of the people behind the Sea Consciousness were pure or not, it resulted in a place where the cycle of violence, suffering, and death is prominent, just like the gameplay, changing the survivors into broken people who can never return to their former lives ever again, and damn, They just like me for real. I really like the world of Stalker. The atmosphere is top notch, it really drags you into its world, and I can say the same about the character and monster designs. The gunplay though is just not there. It can be really inaccurate at times, especially during long range gunfights. The enemies feel bullet spongy either because of the inaccuracy of the guns or hitting anywhere besides between the eyeballs, result in only a tickle on their sacks. While not exactly a negative, the gameplay is simple and relies on your enjoyment of simply surviving tough situations and less on building up your character. I wish exploration was more fulfilling as well. There's very little incentive to go out of your way to look for shit and risk getting anal by anomalies besides caches and the occasional artifacts. The game did keep me playing to the end, but I probably won't be coming back to this one. Stalker Clear Sky is the prequel to Shadow of Chernobyl, released in 2008. GSC Game World never really made a proper sequel to Shadow of Chernobyl until just recently with Stalker 2. Clear Sky and the next entry, Call of Pripyat, did improve on the gameplay, but not in a major enough way to warrant separate videos, so I'm including them here. Visually, there's not a lot different here compared to Shadow of Chernobyl. I guess there are more effects and better lighting since it's upgraded from DirectX to 10, but the DirectX 10 mode didn't work for me, so I was stuck in 9 and didn't see much of a difference. The game crashed a couple of times even with the reclamation patch, so performance-wise it's about the same as the last game. The gameplay is still janky ballsack with one loose nut. I feel like it might even be a bit worse than Shadow of Chernobyl. Every gun here still feels inaccurate and the enemies are still bullet sponges. This is still on the Stalker difficulty, but the gameplay was one of the things I hoped this game would change. Funnily enough, the most accurate weapon for me was the starter handgun you get. Something about it just made it easier for me to land headshots. I felt gay with the amount of brains I was blowing with this thing. Fast travel is now a thing, but it's just a bit too expensive to be used regularly. You can now repair and upgrade weapons. Yeah, you can't do that in Shadow of Chernobyl for some reason. I guess you just gotta keep looting new ones or awaken your inner Englishman and start shanking everything to death. I guess you can use upgrades to counteract the inaccuracy of your weapons, but it's too expensive, so I didn't bother. The best addition though are the random events. Stalkers can randomly start mini missions out in the zone that you can join. Sometimes it's a base capture mission, sometimes it's a battle between factions. It's really cool seeing shit happen. You can hear stalkers talking on the radio, signaling for help and all that. The game feels much more lively than Shadow of Chernobyl. You play as a mercenary named Scar, who is on a job guiding scientists, when all of a sudden a phenomenon named emissions happened, and everyone died except for you. You are then rescued by a secret faction called Clear Sky that wants you to help them stop the emissions, since, you know, your body is immune to them and all that. You do some jobs for them and later finds out that Straylock from the first game has something to do with the emissions. So you try to track him down and pop him before he pops everyone else with the emissions. Half of the story, and maybe even a bit more, is just you going around the map doing what you did as Straylock in the first game. Which is also what you did as Amnesiac Straylock, because a part of the story of Shadow of Chernobyl is tracking down Straylock and kill him, except this time it's actually happening in the past, but with a different perspective instead. Did you get that? Well, I didn't, and I wrote this entire paragraph. It gets more confusing the more you think about it, so let's just move on. At some point, you end up trapped inside a bubble anomaly, and you have to break out of it. The second last section of the story takes place in a town called Lemansk, where a bunch of monolith guys fucks you split road style, coming out from every corner, every block, and every ass cheek just to put a bullet in your head. It doesn't matter how ready you think you are when entering this shitty town, you will be blown up. It's so bad that my armor lost all of its durability and there's no one to repair it. Who thought of this shit? At the end, there's a helicopter boss fight, and man, I don't know about you, but that kind of shit has no place in a game like this. Stalker is about wandering the zone, surviving against the odds, but here we are with a Call of Duty level. It's a bit out of place. The final section takes you to Straylock as he struts his ass over to do whatever he's doing. You jump through portals just like in Shadow of Chernobyl and shoot Strelok once in a while with the Gauss gun. After you get him, a cutscene plays and it looks like he's on fentanyl being brainwashed, which leads him to going on the death truck at the beginning of Shadow of Chernobyl. The end. I'm not gonna pretend I understood everything that happened here, but what I got is a story that's a retread of the first game but at the same time not really, and what is new is a frustrating mess. There are some nice additions to the gameplay here, but the story is just not interesting. Like the last game, the atmosphere really pulled me in and kept me going, but everything else, I don't have much to say. Stalker Call of Pripyat is the third entry in the Stalker series. This is by far the best game in the series in terms of gameplay. The bullets actually go where you fire them this time, which for some reason felt like a concept so foreign and out of my mind and asshole after the last two games. It's got all the mechanics from the first two games and the missions are now a game mechanic. Once in a while an mission would start and you gotta hide for a bit. It's not too intrusive, it happens like once a day. I only encountered one in the field and all the other times were when sleeping, so I missed out on most of them. Money plays a much more important part in the story now, so doing side quests is actually encouraged. The ending is affected by everything you do, from the people you meet, the quests you do for them, and even what happened in those quests. So basically it's Fallout, but Stalker. Every mechanic feeds back into each other, which felt way more fun to play this time around compared to the last two. You play as Major Dekturov, sent into the zone to investigate a series of helicopter crashes. You start with a few crash sites, and you can investigate them in any order. You go through labs and other anomaly-infested areas, and there's even a minefield that keeps blowing me up, but the game gives you so much healing items that it doesn't fucking matter. Later on, you get your ass to Pripyat through an underground tunnel to get in contact with your military buddies, and I don't know. Pripyat is kinda boring. There are a bunch of similar looking buildings with a lot of apartments. Maybe that's how it is in real life, but I think the devs could have taken some creative liberties here and there. Have some unique landmarks, you know. At some point you get a broken Gauss gun, but there's no way to drop it. Apparently you can get it fixed and use it, but I never found out how, so I just carried it for the remainder of the game. Man, that was a fucking mess, because that gun weighs a ton, like 10 kilos? You should be able to at least get rid of it if you don't want it, and you don't even need it for the story. There's a cult made of brainwashed soldiers from the Monolith faction controlled by weird radio antennas, which is cool, but there's only like 2 missions that has to do with them. At the end, Strelok comes out of nowhere to explain what happened to the helicopters. Apparently anomalies can change positions when emissions happen, so the helicopters got fucked up because of the anomalies appearing in the sky. Also, the emissions disrupt radio signals, so the military guys couldn't contact the HQ. Did nobody try to contact HQ when there are no emissions? Maybe not use the radio when there's a big radiation storm outside? That makes no sense. Anyway, they wait for an emission to end, contact the HQ for evac, and you get the fuck out while Monolith tries to blow you up. The end. In terms of non-linearity, the story is great. The quests you do for the people you meet changes and adds to the ending, which is cool. What's not so cool is the general story. You just kinda go around looking at shit most of the time. It's not very memorable aside from a few sections like the tunnel to Pripyat or the Monolith cult radio antennas or fighting that fat thing underground. The Stalker vibes are still here. There's the usual weird Stalker shit you encounter in the wild, but I just don't feel too strongly about anything here. Shadow of Chernobyl is definitely the best in terms of story. The storytelling wasn't great, but the story beats were more memorable and had more going on. Strelok's story has mystery behind it, and it has more of an impact on the world compared to Dekturov's. Clear Sky is definitely at the bottom in terms of story, but Call of Pripyat is not so far off. Stalker has one of the coolest worlds with some of the best atmosphere I've seen in a video game. The gameplay started off being unapologetically janky and turned into something that's very competent with more progression system to play with and gave players the ability to affect the ending with their actions as the games go on. Shadow of Chernobyl has a decent story that sets up a cool world, but it lacks interesting characters to tie it all together. Maybe it's just me though, since I like character driven stories more than plot driven ones. Clear Sky had an interesting premise, but it all boiled down to mostly being a repeat of the first game's events that ends with a section that doesn't feel like a Stalker game at all. Call of Pripyat's story is lacking with very few memorable moments, making me bored out of my asshole, causing my balls to shed pubes. If you're here for the gameplay, go with Call of Pripyat. Story, shout out Chernobyl. Only if you're curious, then check out Clear Sky. If you're broke, or if you want more, check out Stalker Anomaly. It's a free overhaul of Call of Pripyat that combines the maps of all 3 games and lets you roam free and do whatever Stalker things you want to do. I didn't spend much time on Anomaly, but the amount of customization in its gameplay options had me floored. My balls were dropped for the second time in my life. You can make this your ideal Stalker experience. The game is modded to hell and it feels so tight to play and so nice to look at, and I recommend it. This has been fun. It's been a while since I dived into a new series like this. I didn't exactly find my next obsession, but the Stalker games are interesting to say the least. I will be playing Stalker 2. The devs over at Ukraine are hard workers, man, with everything that's been happening over the last few years. We gotta at least support them through this. Thanks for watching, drop a like and subscribe. See you in the next video.